Welcome to Business Reporter's The Future CFO campaign. I'm Louise Sewell. The CFO has a pivotal role to play in maximising cost reductions from procurement. He or she needs to act like a broker between budget holders and the procurement department to maximise savings. What are the biggest challenges and opportunities in this role today? This is what we're going to discuss with Alex Klein from Efficio and Carl Barnes from Informa. Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Why should the CFO care about procurement?
The CFO cares about profitability, cares about cost reduction, and procurement is a massive cost reduction lever. So for a manufacturing company, procurement represents between 60 and 70% of all costs, but even for a bank or a services company, it represents 30% of all costs. So it's a significant amount of money, and it's a relatively easy way of making savings without having to go for headcount reductions, without having to do factory closures or large investments. It's a relatively easy way to add money to the bottom line, and typically there is an opportunity. It's not been optimized. Procurement doesn't work in a joined up way with the budget holders, and that's where I think the CFO can really come in and help.
And just explain what the CFO's role would be.
Well, the CFO really can act as a broker between procurement on the one hand, who's trying to effect the cost reduction, and the budget holders on the other hand, who may be concerned about their operations, their operational stability, who may be defensive of the savings push. And the CFO can make sure that the two are aligned and marching in the same direction.
Savings validity, surely this is a key issue for CFOs.
Tangibility of the savings is absolutely paramount, actually. If you can't touch and feel the savings that you're creating through the procurement initiative, there's really not an awful lot of point in going down that road. So I think it's a really important issue, and one that the CFO needs to pay a great deal of attention to.
And what about budgeting and target setting? What's the plan for this?
It has to be included in the budgets and the targets, just like any other cost item, and you need to be incorporating it as early as you're aware of what the savings are going to be that you're aiming for. And having everybody on the same page about what the objectives of the initiative are is a key success factor for the initiative overall.
And ultimately, the savings don't help if they're not taken out of the budget. And that really is the CFO's job, is to take the money out of the budgets at the end. And there's a couple of ways of doing that.
Yeah, give me an example.
Well, one way is to come in at the end and say, well, thank you very much, dear budget holder, thank you very much, procurement, for making this big effort. We'll now take away the money. Or probably the smarter way of doing it is to set a budget challenge up front, and for the CFO to do that, and then allowing procurement to come in and be the good guy and help the budget holders to step up to that budget challenge. And that's probably the smarter way of doing it. And it's, again, the CFO acting as that broker between the various functions.
How can the CFO really guide that and channel that?
It's a big issue because for most CFOs, the only interaction they have with procurement is at the end of the year, when they have a very uncomfortable discussion about
P&L, is this?
P&L, where's the money you promised me? How come it didn't hit my bottom line? But I guess I would say, rather than come in at the end of the year and ask that awkward question when it's too late, the CFO should be proactive.
So you're budgeting, you're targeting.
And you're working with procurement throughout the journey as the numbers develop.
And how far ahead is that planned in?
It doesn't need to look necessarily that far ahead. I think the disconnect, the reason savings don't materialize, is often that the data points that fed into the savings business case were wrong in the first instance. And that's where the CFO can help to make sure that the data, as you go through the procurement process, gets validated, gets signed off, and everybody's comfortable with it at different points along the process rather than just at the very end.
If you don't kind of engage early into the process as a CFO, and you don't create that kind of baseline of spending, you've almost lost the battle there.
Does it run away with you then?
It comes back to actually sort of the way that you put procurement into the company in the first place, because if you make a kind of grand proclamation that says, you guys are bad at buying, We have now a procurement team that are good at buying.
They're going to
We're gonna do
really
it for you.
enjoy that, aren't they?
They're going to really enjoy that. And if you haven't actually managed to establish a really good baseline, then they can refute it, and refute it quite easily.
So you need them to trust you quite early on in the relationship.
Trust is important. Trust is important. And as Alex was saying, I mean, I think what the CFO has to do is they have to find a mechanism where once a saving has been identified, not only is it really well identified and communicated to everybody, all the stakeholders, but you actually, there's the policeman part of it. You do have to deny the business the ability to spend that money unless they're in a position to justify the investment. It becomes an extra investment, if you like. One of the, I guess, mistakes I think I made in our procurement project was we termed these savings procurement savings, and we had a procurement team. So it looked like the savings that we made in conjunction with working with the teams in the business were being credited to the procurement team.
Right.
And interestingly enough, what we've started to do, Alex, back in Informa, in Connect 365, is call them operational savings. Right. Simple change in emphasis. So now we're measuring operational savings that stem in large part from procurement, but rather than be crediting even by accident the procurement team, the operational team are getting that credit for it really overtly.
And let's look at Informa. What's their view on procurement?
We're a large FTSE 100 company. We have a lot of buying leverage, some of which isn't fully utilised actually. We've done a number of procurement initiatives over the course of the last few years as we've come together as 4 trading divisions, and it's had a big impact on the bottom line, and there's more to come. I see Informa spending more time and effort and thought around this area because, as Alex says, it's a relatively easy way of improving your bottom line. If you haven't been paying attention to it as a CFO, you certainly should have done.
And would you like to give me an example of how Informa have worked with an individual company with procurement?
We've worked with Efficio on a couple of projects. One in which we did a full project around our buying of hotel space, travel and entertainment budgets and related spends around audio visual for the conferences that we run. The bulk of our conferences and the hotel space and the services that surround that are now bought through agreements that we created when we did the project with Efficio 2 years ago. And that's had a really significant impact on our gross margin and our productivity and our profitability.
Alex, give me 3 takeaway points.
Recognise the opportunity, recognise that there's an opportunity there and go after it. Secondly, be involved with the programme, be involved with procurement early on, not just at the end. And thirdly, think about how to get the money out of budgets and think about that upfront rather than, again, at the end.
And Carl?
So the first is make sure you've created tangible savings that everybody can actually see. The second is communication to all the stakeholders. Make sure that everybody knows what's going on, that the project's happening, the objectives, and your progress towards meeting those objectives. And the last thing is to make sure that credit for the savings actually goes to the business, not the procurement function who are acting as an enabler. An important one, but actually it's the business that's doing all the hard yards.
Gentlemen, thank you for taking us through the role of the CFO in procurement.
Thank you.
Thank you.